All right. Hello, everybody. This is Leo Brady, film critic with AMovieGuy.com. I am delighted to be talking with the absolutely fantastic filmmaker, the director of his newest documentary called Second Chance. It's Ramin Bahrani. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like, you're coming off the success of The White Tiger. I've seen so many of your films, but it may not be a surprise to me that you made this documentary, but I was surprised to see that it was your first documentary. So what brought you to this point to making Second Chance?
Yeah. I guess a lot of my features have documentary elements to them, or they're based or inspired by real stories and real people that I have spent time researching. So
Yeah.
to me also, it was surprising that it took this long to get a first doc made. But I was actually editing The White Tiger, and the producers approached me with the story and wanted to know if I wanted to make a fiction film. They were going to make the documentary on their own.
Yeah.
I looked into Richard Davis's life and the company's Second Chance and the kind of wealth of archival material. I proposed to them that I should make the doc instead, and thankfully they agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I was like really excited once I heard that this was your next film. I mean, but what's interesting about it is, as you said, a lot of your movies have sort of take an approach on a view of society, a view of sort of cultures, or the way that we as humans sort of interact. But I was interested. I found it fascinating, honestly, that it felt like you took a very neutral approach to this subject matter, uh, but yet it still allowed for the the point to come across. What was the kind of approach you wanted to take from the start, and how did you sort of shape that as the documentary went along?
Yeah, Richard Davis is kind of his journey is pretty wild and surprising and also funny.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought I was going to meet a man that was going to tell me about his bravery and his incredible invention and the good he did, which he did do, but
Yeah.
also some of the mistakes he made, which cost people their lives, actually.
Yeah.
And he didn't really seem capable of that introspection. So that changed the nature of what I thought the film was going to be. And suddenly it became about, other than his bravery and his invention, it became about, impunity, cognitive dissonance, myth making, the lies that we tell ourselves that other people not only believe, but even if they know it's not true, they want to believe in terms of the leaders of their community or the leader of the company.
Yeah.
And it all started to seem like a metaphor for the country to me. And I didn't really want to say all that in the movie, but I thought it would be apparent to the audience watching it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too. There's a great trust you obviously have for your audience. You're not gonna like spoon feed it to them. You're not gonna like just, say it out loud. Um, but the word, while I was watching this movie, that kept going through my head was the word accountability. And I think that's a word that isn't used enough in conversations with people, but also, looking at Richard Davis, did that word ever come up in your conversations with him? And what is sort of your viewpoint on just that word, accountability, and how we as a society have, come face to face with taking accountability for our mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about impunity, which has a pretty is a good brother to the word accountability. And
Yeah.
I tried to press Richard to accept certain things that had happened in the past, things that are documented, there's factual evidence for, but he continued to evade and deny. And I think he was always the hero or the victim of his own stories. If something bad had happened, he would quickly blame either somebody else, or he would blame, in one case, he blames China.
Right.
And he was quick to make himself the hero of stories as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because like when I had first met you and I had first studied a lot of your films, we had talked about Roger Ebert as a film critic, his impact on your work. And when I think about Roger Ebert, I think about those great documentary filmmakers like Werner Herzog and Errol Morris. I know we spoke about them in the past, but what's interesting to me is that I know that they're two directors that have kind of inspired you in your filmmaking style in a way, but I feel like you weren't making a documentary the way that they were. What types of sort of inspirations were you picking off of and how you were going to make this movie?
I mean, I love both of those
Yeah,
filmmakers, and of course with Werner, I love his fiction films too. And
yeah,
they're both very skilled at blending fiction and documentary.
yeah,
You know, here I had a great cinematographer, Adam Stone, who I've known for 20 years. He shot a short doc for me, but he shoots all of Jeff Nichols' fiction films, and
yeah,
also he shot a lot of great docs like Wild Wild Country. So we
yeah,
talked a lot about the look of the film, um, you know, the lenses we used, the locations. We scouted a lot of locations to decide where we would have people be interviewed.
yeah,
Some people like Richard had a great home. Other
yeah,
people, we needed a location that would create a look and a tone and a kind of a storytelling quality to the film.
yeah.
And you know, we tried to make it pretty cinematic in that way.
Yeah, no, I feel like you kind of achieved that. I love to hear a little bit of behind the scenes sort of information. What was your process? Honestly, you said you had sort of a rich collection of footage, but like, what's your process of getting in contact with the employees? I mean, did you have people who were like, "No, I will not talk to you at all," or and is it just a simple? Is it simple Google searches and let me get in contact with the people who worked for this company?
Yeah, I mean, the producers were Vespucci Group. The producers were excellent at finding people, and you know, in the first round of filming, we had some really good interviews, but I felt we needed more, and they kind of really redoubled their efforts and found some great subjects that were willing to talk. Like Richard's second ex-wife, it took a long time to convince her to speak,
Wow.
but when she did, in fact, I find the women in the film to be very eloquent, and their philosophy is so different than Richard and even Aaron. They're very different from the men because this gun shooting thing is it's quite a masculine thing, and the women have such an incredible counterpoint philosophically and emotionally to what Richard, who he is and what he stands for. And so Kathleen came out of that, and she was a phenomenal, really just a phenomenal speaker and thinker. And then really finding Clifford was, you know, that came out of the second round of filming, and it totally transformed the movie. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting too, the juxtaposition that you create with the women in the film, the way that they're open, more honest, more allowing themselves to sort of like speak more truth than the men. Obviously, topics of masculinity and how sort of we allow ourselves to open ourselves up is a topic that we talk about a lot. What did you find yourself sort of having to pry more with the men than the women? And was there sort of a thesis that you sort of found yourself creating that you didn't originally see that was there?
Yeah, I think especially in the some of it we sensed in the shooting, but in the editing, it became so apparent how strong the women characters were.
Yeah.
And all the things you said, and also they just had an ability to be reflexive. They were able to think back on their life and articulate it in a way that the men didn't seem as capable. I don't want to say all of the men, some were. Like Clifford was very
Right.
eloquent, and
Right.
also Clifford is a man who shot Aaron Westrick. It's kind of a, you have to
Yes.
see the film to know, but it's a pretty startling story.
Yep.
Then there was another man I thought was also quite eloquent, which was Tim Pazensky. He's a man who, as a teenager, Richard threatened his life. He's one of two people to have worn a wire against Richard.
Yeah.
I thought he was really rich and deep, you know, the way in the end he brings Eastern philosophy into it. And I thought he was kind of a great character who, I mean, the story that he tells with what Richard did to him is kind of unbelievable. You have to see the movie to really, I can't articulate it now. It's too crazy, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and you do it so beautifully. You put it all together so fantastically. One last question before I have to go. You talked a little bit about how they initially wanted to make it a narrative feature. you know, it's interesting. It's always interesting to me. I feel like a lot of times with films, you're either saying that should have been a narrative feature or that should have been made into a documentary instead. I think you made the right choice here. I mean, but like, can you sort of articulate weighing that option? And did you halfway through think to yourself, well, maybe this should be a narrative feature, or were you like, no, this is the right way to go about it?
I mean, I'm happy I made the doc. You know, when you see a man shooting himself with a gun point blank in the chest, recreating that, I don't know how you would do that, and have it be that real and shocking.
Yeah.
And then Richard Davis was also a filmmaker. He was a salesman. He was an inventor. He was a marketer. He was a propagandist.
Yeah.
You know, and he made 8 hours of movies, and the movies are so by turns campy, fascistic, brutal, hilarious, startling that how could I have ever done that? You know,
Yeah.
it reminded me of Goodfellas, where there's the sequence with the Maury's wigs, right? And there's
Yes.
watching the commercial on television, and Scorsese had tried twice to film that himself, but he could never make it as campy as the real thing. So
Yeah.
then he hired a company in New Jersey to make it. And so how could I have ever recreated it better than what Richard did himself?
Yeah. Well, you did a phenomenal job once again. You know, it has to be one of the best documentaries of the year. Ramin Bahrani, thank you so much for talking with me today. Love your work, and congratulations.
Thanks. Good to see you again.
Yeah, take care.
Bye bye.